Welcome back to the channel. You see the information on the screen, so you know what I'm about. So let's get into it. As you can see, I am joined today by the absolutely wonderful Ebony, who comes out. She's a part of Christian Singles Connect, but she's going to help me today. She found some really great videos that I think it would be nice to actually have, or I should say, she thought it would be nice to actually have a male and female perspective on. So we're going to look at some of these videos, and then me and Ebony are going to talk about them. All right.
One of the reasons why I believe a lot of Christian women get dogged out the most is because oftentimes in church, we are taught that common sense is an enemy of faith. A lot of times these crazy, wild stories about a man ruining a woman's life and turns out he's gay, turns out he's like a chronic womanizer, all of these wild scenarios. That woman met that man in church. We will assume that just because a man is in church, he is also a man of God. Instead of authentically going through the process of dating, which is demonized a lot of times in church, genuinely getting to know someone and getting to know their character, okay, and seeing the fruit of who they are outside of church. Because anybody could put on a performance at church. Oh, he serves on 15 different ministries. Oh, his aunt serves as a deacon. Oh, his father's a pastor. All of these things that you think, oh, he must be solid. And sometimes those are the ones that will dog you out the most. Common sense, discernment is not an enemy of faith. I don't care who prophesied that that was your husband. I don't care what dream you had. Make sure the fruit lines up with what you feel like God is telling you. The Bible literally says the heart is deceitful above all things. You can deceive yourself into thinking that God told you something that he did not tell you. There's a joke that I heard like, oh, get you a Christian girl because if you cheat on her, she's just going to blame the devil. Doesn't matter what she sees, she's going to blame it on the devil, or she's going to spiritualize something. Not realizing that God also speaks through the practicality of what you see. And it's not just through dreams and prophecies and church. Stop getting hype over the fact that he wants to go to church together, or he wants to pray together, or he wants to read the Bible together. If a man is a dog, he will use even the Bible and even spirituality to be a predator. Pray, read, fast, and use your common sense. You could do all four.
Well, before we got married, we dated in high school. And in high school, I knew that I was number one, but I knew when I met him, he told me, you're my starter, but I got other ones on the bench, And, what else would you tell me, baby?
That you my point guard.
Yes. And that you love me.
But I like them.
Right. So I was in a relationship I was okay with that as long as I was first. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. I want, the women to know out there, I didn't know Jesus. I didn't, know who I was. What'd you say, babe? I had no value.
No, you had no value. You had no worth. You did not know who you were.
He said you didn't know your self-worth.
Right. And I'm 17.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm a teenager. And I was preconditioned to think this way because my mother divorced my father for infidelity. And I'd always thought if you could just forgive him, our family would stay together.
Oh, that's deep.
So that was not a deal breaker for me, as long as I knew about it. Now, he knows if I found out about it, we'd have a problem.
But if he told you in advance, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
So if he said, hey, listen, tomorrow I got this little shorty lined up. I'm going to go run through and I'm going to smash it. I'll see you the next day.
Well, he would never say that.
It was usually after the fact.
Yeah.
Hey, I had a hiccup last night. Just heads up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A hiccup.
And so you looked at being outside the home as a failure. But you had to stay in the household,
right,
no matter how you showed up as a husband, but you wasn't going to relinquish your responsibility as a father.
I would tell her all the time, I'm not going to let another, I had two daughters who are right now 31 and 29, and I always told her, I'm not going to let another man come here and feed my children, my daughters especially. That's not going to happen on my watch. So I just said, well, and plus I came from a two-parent home. Even though my dad had 10 kids by 6 different women, he married my mom and had me and my 3 sisters.
Right.
So before that, he had 6 kids.
Yeah.
So coming from a two-parent home, that's all I knew. So I'm like, we just going to work this out. So I came from dysfunction.
And that was our normal. So there was even one time one of his girlfriends came to my job to confront me because she found out about me And I'd be like, chick, I'm the wife. But anyway, she asked
came
me,
to confront you
she
'cause she
did.
found out
She
about
found out
you?
about me.
She had to explain to her,
And
I
said,
work
"Listen,
2 jobs.
I go, why would I get rid of him?
He worked
He
2
works
jobs.
2 jobs. Sometimes you can't afford divorce. I'm like, he's making rent. You know, we got to work this out. And I let her know I'm not. And she's like, are you going to leave him? I'm like, no, I'm not leaving him. You know, I said, we're just work it out like we always do. And she didn't understand that. But
She said she didn't understand
You know,
that. So what was she trying to do? Get rid of you so she can keep you?
Yeah,
I guess
that was the
but
plan.
he was
That was the plan.
Listen, he was financially an asset at that time, you know. but I did reach a point where I was tired, and I finally prayed the prayer. It's probably about 5 years into our process. Lord, do whatever it takes to save him.
We saw all of that. That is some crazy stuff, a little bit from, Dear Future Wifey, and then from another young lady out on TikTok. So before I go into all the trauma I think these people have, you know how people say, ladies first. So what are you thinking about all of this, Ebony?
I do think the first young lady definitely had very valid points in her videos. Just based on being a Christian woman, coming across other Christian women and their ideals towards, their spouse or their future spouse, especially when you get in the realm of God revealed to me, this is my husband, you know. So I think she had very good points because she said apply common sense, you know. And as we are growing in our relationship with Christ and we are in alignment with the will of God, He does give us wisdom and discernment in those areas to navigate relationships properly without being delusional, I guess, or without, playing a role in our own suffering. So I think she had some very good points in her video. The other video, wow, that caused a big uproar on social media. I see. Um, uh, to it couldn't be me. I just say that I would not want that to be my story. But I can understand that, her and her husband, they've come out on the other side of that. So that's beautiful to see. But at the same time, I do think some women that it could be harmful for some women to see that because then they may fall into that same, pattern of continuing to allow trauma play out in their relationships, you know. So I think that some women may see this and will be like me and like, okay, yeah, no, that's not my story. Me, that type of love never find me. But then I do think that there will be other women who see it and they will say, okay, well, this is okay, or this may be fine. Or if I have experienced this, it's okay. If he's being unfaithful, if he's cheating, it's okay. I can deal with this because the end result is going to be beautiful. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the Dear Future Wifey has so much to break down. I mean, you could look at it from so many different aspects, but I know one of the things that I wanted to talk about in the very beginning of it, at least to put it out there, is notice how the guy, the pastor, which to me is sad that he's a pastor, but the pastor, he came from an environment just like the environment he created. So his dad, even though he was in this marriage, his dad was out there cheating, was sleeping with other women. He had other siblings from other women. I think he said 6 other women, if I'm not mistaken. And then he pretty much did the same thing. Okay, but again, I think if you look at the wife, she kind of went through the same similar type of thing. So both of them, and this is why I think it's so interesting, because both of them found each other. And that's why a lot of times I talk about toxicity is a lot of times we don't understand that many times we ourselves might be attracted to toxicity. And we have to take a look in the mirror because there's other people out there, whether they're male or female, and they don't find people that have these issues. They literally avoid them their whole life. And then other people seem like they're a magnet and they just constantly are going to that drama over and over again. So I think you have to look at the energy standpoint of it and the trauma standpoint of it, and the fact that a lot of people really do like trauma, even when it's within themselves. And then I think once you even get on the other side of it, just looking at from the perspective of what the woman was going through, even in the very beginning, the guy told her, "I'm pretty much gonna cheat. You're my point guard. You just one of the team." And we've even seen some other people. There was actually a famous dating coach. I'm not gonna say his name, but there was a famous dating coach who pretty much did the same thing. His wife came out, told the story about how, he was actually out there in the streets having sex with every single other woman, and she just put up with it until she couldn't put up with it no more. And so there are women out there that just think that that's life. And then you have other people, again, other influencers that are trying to say that, okay, if a man has worth, then a woman is going to have to share him. And I think, again, we have the wrong understanding of what a good person is and what a bad person is. And to all the men that I know that are watching and that will get frustrated, and this is part of the argument that I also make for a lot of people, just to be fair, is you have a lot of men that will have babies by 3 different women, and then you have other men that have 0 babies. And that's why, people talk about the Pookies and Raymonds, they make their rounds. They're out there populating the whole Black community. And then you have this subset of good, quote unquote good men. I can't necessarily say they're all good, because sometimes they need to get out there in the street a little bit more to meet women and to talk to women and stuff like that. And I think that's a part of it. But that side is not even getting going, right? And then I do think in the Christian community, we do have this mindset of this constant forgiveness. Even if it's to the point of pain, it's just like, I'm gonna constantly forgive. I'm gonna constantly forgive. Yet the man, the pastor, he basically had this done to him as when he was a child, his father did this, and then he passed that now to his wife, and not only to his wife, more than likely his children. So now more than likely his daughters and sons are going to have to deal with the same generational curse that he refused to get on top of. And that the woman that came into this, now she is basically, showing that to her children.
Absolutely. I agree. One point you made is the trauma of it all. When you are seeking and entering into relationships and you have not properly dealt with your trauma, it's going to be detrimental for everybody. And we see, like you said, there was trauma on both sides of it. One was maybe just a product of his environment. That's what he saw. That's what he thought was normal. It was normalized behavior. And I do think that in older generations, that was kind of a normalized behavior. Grandpa cheated, Papa cheated. Papa had other babies, it's not right, but it was more so normalized just based on the way that marriage was valued, and just, we get together, we stay together because the family structure is so important, is way more important. It was way more important in those older generations than it is in ours, obviously. But so his trauma was just being a product of his environment, normalized behavior. Hers was from a place of brokenness, maybe abandonment. Her mother divorced her father, so she didn't want to end up divorced. She didn't want to be without, the male and the female, or without her husband in her house. Like I said, I don't know these people, I don't know their story, so I can't really just, analyze this. But I do feel like both sides of it, both the trauma that he experienced and the things that he seen growing up and what she experienced definitely played a part in that. And as you said, if he would have made the decision to say, hey, I'm going to be different, I'm not going to do this. I saw that, then he probably wouldn't have went down that path, and vice versa. If she would say, hey, I'm going to be different, or hey, I understand why my mother did this, why my mother left because of this, and sometimes we do blame our parents for things, and we blame our parents for how we're brought up, how we're raised, the things that we learn, which is a big part of how we learn, to love, how we learn to build relationships and connect with others. But as we get older, we have to make that decision for ourselves. We have to make a choice. So we can't blame it all on trauma after a while. I'm big on giving grace, giving forgiveness, but at a certain point in time, I'm not going to excuse bad behavior. It's either we're going to work on this, and we can work on this and we can love each other from a distance, or we're just, we can just part ways and you can continue to exhibit bad behavior due to your trauma, and I will heal and move forward. Because I don't, like I said, I don't believe in playing a role in your own suffering. So that is one thing. Another point that you mentioned was forgiveness, right? And yes, forgiveness is essential. Okay. We should forgive all day, every day. The Bible says 70 times 7. We should definitely forgive everyone. But one of the things that I coach my clients on, because I am a forgiveness coach, is that forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation with another person. Okay, yes, true enough, we were forgiven for our sins and reconciled back to the Father in heaven. But that does not apply, that principle does not always apply in relationships. Yes, you can forgive them, you can love them with the love of Jesus, but that does not mean that that person has to be a part of your life, because as long as you were continuing to say, hey, I forgive this person, we're going to get back together, you were continuing to be in agreement with whatever trauma, whatever spirit or demonic entity is operating within that person, if they continue to. Now, I do believe that you can reconcile with someone, you can forgive, and you can get back with someone, but there is a process that you're going to go through and that God is going to take that person through as well, to ensure that when you come back together, it is not like how it was before. It's not no trauma, it's not no chaos, no confusion, no pain or anything. So I definitely do think that that is something that we can kind of, it can kind of work against us, because we can be gracious, we can be forgiving, but we don't know how to set boundaries. We allow that to kind of get us in a state of lacking boundaries. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it was interesting because at the Dear Future Wifey, I think I had watched the part where they were saying they had been married almost 30 years or something like that, and he's pretty much been doing this almost most of the marriage. And she's held on throughout that whole time, and I mean, I commend her for holding on, trying to make the marriage work, but I had problems with the fact that I don't think he was trying to make the marriage work. I just think that now if they just have it open, it kind of felt like that, honestly, that they just had more of an open relationship, because she kind of knew he was out there in the streets. And so she didn't get mad about it. But it's still, I think, especially being a pastor, because Paul talked about that, men being of good character and are trying to do the right thing and are trying to follow Christ. And I think that we have an environment where we're allowing, honestly, pastors to get away with with a lot of things. And don't get me wrong, I think everybody makes mistakes, and I think sometimes the best people that advocate for something is the very people that made the mistake in the first place. But I think in this particular case, this guy has made this mistake over and over and over and over again for somewhere between 20 and 25 years. And that's a lot of time, to be making that quote unquote mistake. But I did want to talk a little bit about, that the first lady, and the fact that, she was talking about finding people in the church and all the problems with the people in the church. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you think that there are good people in the church? Do you think that people are over spiritualizing? Do you think that people are just finding the wrong person in the church? I recently did a video talking about how Christian women really wanted a Christian thug. And that's really who they wanted. So, especially from a woman's perspective, what do you think is really the issues with a lot of the relationships within the church? And, like I said, you just hit one part, one concept, two concepts, whatever just comes to mind.
I do think that there are good men in the church. I'm not going to say that I don't think that there are any good men in church. I think there are good men and good women in the church. Now, why they not finding each other, or why is it so hard for them to find each other? It could be a couple of different reasons. Uh, as far as over spiritualizing, I would say yes. And I would say no too. Okay. Because the over spiritualizing, I see that more with women than with the men. Right. So for men, I would say no. For women, I would definitely say yes. Um, I think that the issue is not so much, it is really having a healthy understanding of what it is that you want to give and receive from a relationship. But I would say it's just a lack of having a healthy understanding of what a relationship takes and what you're going to be able to give and receive in a relationship in a healthy way. Um, Preferences, definitely. Unrealistic, idealistic standards, I think, is a big part too. Um, so it's really just kind of, I feel like, that ego battling with our beliefs. Because if we are believing, if we are Christians and we are aligned with our faith, our values and our morals are aligned with the will of God, are aligned with our faith, then what the characteristics that we're seeking in a partnership come straight from the Bible, right? And we know that we're not perfect human beings, so no one is going to be perfect to the T, and they are going to have all of this and check off this list, but you want to make sure that those core values are there, that character is a reflection of God's character in a man or in a woman, right? And I think that is where we kind of slip up at, because our ego will battle with our beliefs in faith, because we could meet someone that has this, that, the third, but then we may not want them because of this reason or various reasons. And as far as the over spiritualizing connections, like I said, I've seen that with women. Women getting so fixated getting so fixated on a revelation that they may have had about who was their husband, and it was not that. They will completely not move, they will completely not date, they will not they will not date, they will not go out with anyone, they will not talk to anyone else, because they have been fixated on a revelation. On God revealed my husband to me, God told me this person was my husband. So they are fixated on that person, and that is actually a spirit of obsession. That is idolatry, as well, in a sort. Because one thing a mentor told us in a group, in this group that I am in, like, she was kind of telling her marriage story. She was saying how, she had been married, she got divorced. She had been with two other guys prior to her getting remarried. And those two other guys that she was with them for like a couple years, and God revealed to her those were her husbands, right? That, like, both guys. Um, but either way, she didn't ended up not marrying either one of them for various reasons, for different reasons for both of them. So, like, one thing that she made, it was a very good point that she made, like, the Lord may reveal to you that he is your husband, but you never want to, you want to wait till the Lord reveals it to him. And and when the Lord reveals it to him, he may not accept that revelation. He may not accept that revelation. We know that God never forced his will on us. He gives us free will to choose what we want. So he may reveal to both of you guys that you are supposed to be married, but he may say, nah, I'm not ready for marriage, or nah, I don't think so. Nah, I'm gonna go talk to Shanika right here and see if she's a better wife, if she's a better fit for a wife than this one is. You know what I'm saying? So, and God is not gonna force his will upon him. He's not gonna force him to marry you. He's gonna say, hey, you want a wife? This is your wife. Okay, I'm presenting you with my daughter, and she is your wife. So one of the things that we as Christian women will do, we will wait, we will dwindle in the wind, and we'll say, oh, he's my husband, and I'm gonna wait until he comes back. And I don't think that you should wait for any man to come back. The only man that we should be waiting to come back is Jesus, okay? That's the only man that we should be waiting to come back. And we should also look at the way that the Father loves us, right? If you are holding on, if you're fixated on a particular person being your husband, 9 times out of 10, you are in anguish about it. You are in torment. You are feeling lonely. You are confused. You are isolated. Those are all characteristics of warfare. Those are all characteristics of the enemy attacking you in some way, because you're not moving. You're not moving forward. You're not even, some women may, but some people are not even going after what God wants them to do in that season, because they are waiting for their husband to return. And one of the things I see, I do not like when I do see it, and is when, people talk about, oh, the prodigal returns, and, your prodigal is returning, and your spouse, and, he's returning like the prodigal. But let's look at that parable. When he returned, he returned restored. He returned in humility. And these situations usually don't play out like this. Either you are waiting around and he never returns, or if he does return, it is, out of ego, out of, oh, okay, I know that I can have her now because I'm ready. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like, yes, the Lord does separate people to work on them individually. But if the Lord revealed to you that someone is your husband, and he has not acted on that, and he revealed it to him and he has not acted on that, and then this person goes off and does life with somebody else, no, no, no.
No, I get it. I know for me, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, because what you're talking, starting to lean into now is what I call the new age kingdom marriage. Because kingdom marriage started one way, but now, people are leaning into it another way. And we got all these things all over YouTube talking about kingdom marriage, and women, just like you said, they're waiting for their husband. They think they've heard from the Lord. And part of me, I'll be honest, I mean, part of me wants to believe these women, believe that they've heard from God about it. But then part of me wants to just believe that, did he say that that was your husband, or maybe a potential husband, or maybe that was just somebody that was seriously interested in you that might have husband qualities? For me, what I've noticed is with God, and it's kind of funny, is I will be around certain women, and as crazy as it sounds, I will get something from God, usually in a dream, or usually, through somebody that, is very close to me, that can speak into my life. And then they will tell me, or I might get a reveal something from the Holy Spirit, where they might, God is telling me something about that person, generally in the connection that we have. So I literally had one woman I was dating, and literally the Holy Spirit said, stop dating her. Clear as day. He just, Holy Spirit says stop dating her. Then I've had other women that, honestly, on the very first date, there was a sign where God was saying, this ain't the one. I've literally had that. But what I have not had is a situation where God is like, okay, this is your wife. I just haven't had that. But at the same time, I might not be the type of person that can receive that, if that makes sense. But see, I also believe, this might sound more sci-fi and Marvel-esque, but I believe in the multiverse. And I believe that God sees an infinite amount of possibilities. So I believe that God sees multiple husbands for a woman and he sees multiple wives for a man. And just like if people actually did watch the Marvel films, there was a time when Doctor Strange said he literally looked through thousands upon thousands upon thousands of different multiverses, and there's only one solution to get them out of this. And so I do believe that every once in a while, there's a situation where God has one person that he is saying, this is your person. This is the only person I need you with. This is the only way this is going to work. But I do think, like you said, with a lot of, primarily women, like I said, over spiritualizing it, and they're slowing themselves down from situations. For instance, a woman might get the revelation that this guy over here is her husband, but God didn't necessarily say stop dating. It might literally be through the process of dating that the guy that's her husband finally notices her. Because like I had a friend where literally this is how he got to his wife, because he was my roommate. There was another guy that lived down the hall in college, and the guy down the hall went out on a date with this girl. And the guy down the hall was like, you're not for me. You will be perfect for Jay's roommate.
Mm-hmm.
So he set them up. They've been married for 20 something years.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect for each other. And that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like a woman might, like you said, cut herself off from dating. But then it was through that process of dating that you were really going to get introduced to your husband, because maybe he don't even know who you are. And I've heard about stories like that where a woman might have there was a lady on Bumble, and she actually saw a guy and she swiped right on him, and she knew as soon as she saw him that was her husband. She swiped right on him. The guy did not swipe right on her. She called Bumble. She said, I know this is my husband. You got to get me in touch with him. The people said, no, we're not going to get you in touch with this guy. That's not how the app works. There's nothing we can do for you. So she continued to date, blah, blah, blah. And then about 3 years later, when she was out on a group date, she ran into the guy. And he eventually became her husband. But if she had stopped moving, if she had stopped living, then she would have missed out on her blessing. And to bring it back to David, remember, David was told he was going to be king when he was like, 19? But it was 15, 20 years later when he became king.
Yep.
So there is this point where you have to keep on living. And remember, David refused to kill Saul. Even though he was told he was
Even though he knew he was the king, he refused to kill him on multiple occasions.